Hello there, and welcome into another edition of the JMac podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is another late night recording. I know I promised that I would do Facebook Live, but I've still been feeling a little bit under the weather, so I didn't want to do that. But I have seen so many stories recently with updates with COVID, which was supposed to go away on November 4th, but somehow it did not, that I wanted to bring these to you just in case you hadn't seen them, because I do think that they will impact the way that you go about your daily life. And I want to answer an important question. And that question is, should you expose your children to COVID like many parents do with the chicken pox? Why am I asking this question? Well, has to do with a conversation that I overheard the other day. Happened to be in a convenience store getting a refill of Coke Zero and listening to two people standing there talking, obviously friends who ran into each other inside the convenience store. Neither one of them is wearing a mask. They're engaged in full conversation. And although there is currently a state mask mandate, the employee of the convenience store is not enforcing that mandate. So that's the first thing I notice. Okay. So I hear, because there's a line waiting for the cashier, I hear the conversation, and it goes something like this. Yeah, a friend of mine that we both know has COVID, and she decided that she wanted to just be done with it in their household. So instead of doing what many do, and that's sequester somebody who has COVID, put them in a basement bedroom, put them somewhere else, mom decided in her infinite wisdom, because mom must be an epidemiologist, that she's going to force it on the children, like chicken pox. Let's just get through this. Give it to the husband. So she made them drink out of her Diet Coke soft drink with a straw. And the children hated it, not because they didn't want COVID, but because they hate Diet Coke. And on that point, I absolutely agree. Diet Coke tastes like dirt. We all know it's true. But I digress. So I'm sitting there thinking and processing this idea. And I'd like to know, do you agree with this mother's decision? Do you think that this choice is wise, to just be done with it? I mean, we hear reports all the time that it's very unlikely that COVID is going to cause any problems with young children. So why wouldn't you just get through it with the hope that they build up immunity? Well, I want to answer that question. And I also want to share with you some of the more recent research that has come out that should empower you to make good decisions when it comes to COVID and whether or not you spread it and whether or not you get it. So back to this idea. I'm going to make my kids get the COVID. You know, I don't like it much when parents do this with chicken pox. I understand, but there's a huge difference between chicken pox and COVID-19. What is the main difference? Time, research, understanding. Chickenpox has been around for a long, long time. We know what it is. We know how to treat it. We know what the long-term consequences are. We know what the potential downsides are. So, you know, it comes off at least as a more educated guess as to what the outcome is if you have a chickenpox party. How long has COVID been around? You know, it's called a coronavirus, and what is the name for it? SARS-CoV. Part of the name is an indication that it's brand new, never been seen before, and we know so little about it. We are months in to this pandemic. We simply don't know what the long-term effects are going to be. We do know that people who have it or have had it, that many of them are becoming what's called long haulers. They are experiencing symptoms well after they have faced the main symptoms and tested positive for COVID. those long haul symptoms have given rise to clinics across the country specifically for long haulers. In fact, here in the state of Utah, we have hundreds of Utahns who say they're experiencing this long COVID, which can include a range of symptoms, including inflammation, chronic fatigue, shortness of breath, brain fog, and heart issues, among other things. What happens 2 years from now? Maybe nothing. What happens 5 years from now? Maybe nothing. But honestly, to treat this, and this is what so many have done in this country, and I think in part because of poor leadership, they have decided that they are epidemiologists and they understand everything there is to understand about COVID-19. Just like everyone suddenly in the last 10 days became an election expert. And they're now experts on election fraud because somebody told them there was fraud. And so they believed it and they set out to prove it. We don't know enough about this illness to be exposing your children to it. My recommendation would be that this is the last thing that you do. That you don't want to try and get it. You don't want to try and spread it because we just don't know. And we also know that doctors are learning more about a serious syndrome, as it's called, that does affect some children. And this could be a real problem for these children. Now, it is rare. It arises in some children. And it most commonly causes heart issues. The U.S. has confirmed nearly 1,200 cases of the syndrome. Now, again, that's not a huge number. I wouldn't freak out over that. And I don't want you to be scared over that. But you could be one of those. Your child could be one of those. But not only that, your child could get this thing. You never even know it. And lo and behold, heart conditions or rare symptoms show up 18 months from now or 2 years from now. It is just remarkable to me how many people have decided that they just have the infinite knowledge and wisdom here when it comes to COVID-19 to the point they would put their child's long-term health and safety at risk. It's very odd to me. It's very strange to me. I don't understand it. I understand the chicken pox thing. That makes sense. But again, we have so much knowledge and experience. Chicken pox is not going to suddenly surprise us. COVID-19 might. And it's something we should all be leery of. Now, some other headlines here or research that you may not see because going back to my days on the show called The Browsers, I still watch all of the scientific journals and all of the tech journals, and I watch all of the research coming in on COVID. And something that you should know is that you can get COVID and the flu at the same time. And that could really complicate things. So this is according to new research, and they are finding people who, yes, have come down with both. So if you are in a high-risk category, I would highly recommend that you get the flu vaccine just in case, because you don't want to get them both. And this research says that you can. Now let's move on to masks. Are you still out there? Are some of you still out there saying that the mask is bad for your health? You know, I hear the civil liberties argument. I've told you that states have the right to put in the mask mandate, that the Constitution reserves that right to the states, and that if it weren't so, you would see challenges working their way up the courts. I think that there's one judge in the country that has said that it does violate the Constitution. Maybe that will be a test case that goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court has actually ruled on mask mandates in the past. Now, it was a long time ago. It was 1905, I believe. But they did rule that according to the 10th Amendment, states have this right. The question is, does a president of the United States have this right? Does Joe Biden have the right as president? to put in a national mask mandate. I don't think he does. I don't see that authority in the Constitution, but states do. And he could dangle out funding to those states if they refuse to comply. So we'll wait and see about that. But back to the question, do masks actually impact you? Do they impact your oxygen? Do they impact, let's say that you have a job where it involves a lot of physical activity. Does it keep you from getting enough oxygen? Well, this new study published on the 16th, so that would be 2 days ago, in the Annals of the American Thoracic Society, a team of American and Canadian researchers concluded that while you may feel, let's say that you're rigorously exercising and you have the mask on, you may feel like you are short of breath, but they found little empirical evidence that wearing a face mask significantly diminishes lung function, even when worn during heavy exercise. One of the researchers said, quote, "There might be a perceived greater effort with activity, but the effects of wearing a mask on the work of breathing, on gases like oxygen and CO2 in blood or other physiological parameters are small, often too small to be detected." They also said there is no evidence to support any differences by sex or age in physiological responses to exercise while wearing a face mask. So take that research for what it is. I've shared with you other research that shows that a mask does not impair your oxygen level. And we also just saw research and a change from the CDC that says the mask actually protects the wearer, not just the people around the wearer. For the longest time, most of us who chose to wear a mask, we were doing it because we love our neighbor and we don't want to be spreaders. And it would just destroy us to find out that our carelessness had spread the virus to somebody and they died. Well, now we find out that it actually protects the wearer as well. And then there is this. We always see people trying to skirt the rules, trying to cut corners, and they don't care about the health of other people when they do it. Apparently, travelers who are required to provide, this is airline travelers, when they are required to provide evidence of a negative COVID test before they travel or fly, they are buying black market fake negative COVID tests so that they can fly without paying for the negative test, which means they are choosing their pocketbook over the health and safety of everybody else in the airport and in the planes. And they probably sit there all smugly thinking about how awesome and wonderful they are that they were able to do so. Now, the word that I have is that some of the new testing coming out, they may be doing spot testing before you get on the flight or before you enter the airport. And so you won't be able to buy your own test in advance. This is a change that needs to happen so that we don't allow people to spread the virus around because they don't want to pay for a test. Very sad. Human nature, and very sad. So that is my COVID update for you today. I hope you are doing well. I have some friends who are currently fighting off COVID in their home. They are faring well, so I'm glad to hear that. And of course, we want to make sure that everybody is safe and that nobody gets this while we try and figure it out. Whether they are old or young or in between, we should be trying to stop anybody from getting this until we know. And I think in the short term, we're looking at some more restrictions and more pain. But the good news is it appears that we have several vaccines on the horizon. So the next question will be, who will take the vaccine and who won't? If you're somebody who thinks this is a hoax and you refuse to wear a mask because it is a hoax, odds are you'll probably have the same feeling about the vaccine. So will we be able to achieve some level of herd immunity through a vaccine? Well, that's a battle that is coming. One that we'll continue to watch here on the JMac podcast. Hey, please take a moment, scan that QR code on the screen, make a one-time donation or a monthly donation to this podcast so I can continue to bring you this important information and we can keep the discussions coming. You can also just click on the link in the description for wherever you are viewing this podcast. And if you've heard me, I'm kind of breathing. I hear myself breathing a lot. I told you I'm feeling under the weather, and I've had to stop this podcast several times just to breathe. Hopefully it's not a sign of COVID in our home. If it is, I will sequester. I'm not going to have my children sip from my Coke Zero or my wife so that they can get it and we can be done with it. Mainly because I don't want to share my Coke Zero.